I woke up to the smell of gasoline at 2 a.m. and found my son pouring it around my living room. When I asked what he was doing, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't worry, Mom, you won't be here when it happens." That's when I realized my own child was planning to burn down my house with me inside to collect the insurance money. Before we start, don't forget to like this video, comment where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Have you experienced something like this? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Eleanor Patterson. I'm 71 years old, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And this is the story of how I discovered my son was planning to murder me for insurance money and how I made sure his plan backfired in the most devastating way possible. It was a cold February night when my world turned into a nightmare I could never have imagined. The smell hit me first, sharp and chemical, cutting through the familiar scents of lavender potpourri and vanilla candles I always kept burning. Gasoline, unmistakable and wrong in my carefully maintained home that had been my sanctuary for 30 years. The digital clock beside my bed glowed 2:14 a.m. in angry red numbers, and the house was supposed to be empty except for me. From the top of the stairs, I could see him clearly in the dim light from the street lamp outside. Marcus was wearing dark clothes and moving with careful precision. He had a red plastic gas can in his hands, methodically pouring gasoline in a trail around my living room, soaking the antique furniture I'd inherited from my grandmother, saturating the Persian rugs that had taken me years to save up for. "Marcus?" I called softly, and he looked up at me with an expression that will haunt me forever. No surprise, no guilt, no shock at being caught preparing to commit murder. Just cold calculation, like he was solving a math problem rather than planning to kill his own mother. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, his voice as calm as if discussing the weather. "You won't be here when it happens." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small plastic bottle filled with white pills. "I brought your sleeping medication, the strong stuff Dr. Harrison prescribed. You'll take these, go back to bed, and everything will be over before you feel any pain." The casual way he discussed my murder, as if doing me a favor by planning to drug me unconscious before burning me alive, made my legs weak. This wasn't my son speaking. This was a stranger wearing Marcus's face, talking about my death like a business transaction. "The insurance will take care of everything," Marcus continued in that horrible, calm voice. $2.8 million, Mom. Enough to pay off all my debts, save the business, start fresh. You won't have to worry about being alone anymore, about your arthritis getting worse. This is better for both of us. I realized that all those recent visits, all those questions about my insurance and will, all those helpful offers to handle my finances had been part of this plan. He hadn't been taking care of me, he'd been preparing to kill me. Every act of love and concern had been calculated to position him as the perfect beneficiary. I knew I had only minutes before Marcus stopped talking and started implementing his murder plan. The sleeping pills meant he intended to drug me unconscious before lighting the fire, giving me a small window if I could think fast enough. "Let me get dressed," I said, keeping my voice steady and cooperative. "If this is really happening, I don't want to die in my nightgown." Marcus nodded, seeing this as reasonable from a woman preparing for her own murder. "5 minutes, Mom. Don't try anything stupid. I've disconnected the landline, and your cell phone won't get signal where you'll be taking your pills." He was wrong about my cell phone. The moment I reached my bedroom and closed the door, I moved faster than I had in years. My phone was charging on the nightstand with full signal. I dialed 911, whispering as quietly as possible. "This is Eleanor Patterson at 847 Maple Grove Lane in Atlanta. My son is in my house preparing to burn it down with me inside for insurance money. He has gasoline poured throughout the downstairs and plans to drug me and set the house on fire. I need police and fire department immediately, but quietly, he doesn't know I've called." The dispatcher assured me units were being dispatched and told me to stay on the line. I told her I had to pretend to be getting dressed, but would keep the phone connected. I threw on jeans and a sweater, then did something Marcus would never expect from his elderly mother. I opened my bedroom window facing the backyard where oak trees created shadows. 30 years ago, when I'd bought this house, I'd insisted on an escape route from the second floor. A wooden lattice ran from my bedroom window to the ground, strong enough to support my weight. I'd never thought I'd need to escape from my own son, planning to murder me for insurance money. The February night air was brutal, and my arthritic hands cramped as I gripped the wooden slats, but I made it to the ground without falling or making noise. From the backyard, I could see Marcus through the living room windows, still moving with that horrible calm efficiency, completing his preparations for what he thought would be the perfect crime. I had two choices: run to a neighbor's house or stay close enough to document what Marcus was doing for evidence. I chose to stay and gather proof, using my cell phone to record video of my son preparing to commit arson and murder. The image quality wasn't perfect in dim light, but it clearly showed Marcus spreading gasoline throughout my home, arranging timing devices near electrical outlets, checking his watch as he calculated fire department response times. At 2:31 a.m., Marcus called upstairs. "Mom, time to come down and take your medication." When I didn't respond, I heard his footsteps on the stairs, moving faster now, realizing something wasn't according to plan. Through the windows, I saw him checking my bedroom, then the bathroom, his calm demeanor finally cracking as he realized I wasn't where he'd left me. "Mom," he shouted, and for the first time that night, he sounded panicked. Not concerned for my safety, but afraid his carefully planned scheme was falling apart. I heard him running through the house, checking closets and cabinets. Then the back door slammed open, and he burst into the yard with a flashlight, searching frantically. He was no longer the calm, calculated killer who'd explained why I needed to die. He was a desperate man watching his murder plan disintegrate. That's when I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Marcus heard them too. His flashlight beam swung wildly as he tried to decide whether to run or complete his original plan despite complications. I stepped out from behind the oak tree and faced my son in the yard where I'd taught him to throw a baseball when he was 7. "The police are here, Marcus," I said quietly. "It's over." The next few minutes felt surreal as 6 Atlanta Police Department patrol cars surrounded my house, their emergency lights turning my quiet neighborhood into a crime scene. Fire department trucks followed, along with an ambulance and what appeared to be half the city's emergency personnel. Marcus stood frozen in my backyard, still holding the flashlight, gasoline stains visible on his clothing, and the chemical smell hanging around him like evidence of guilt. When the first officers rounded the corner with weapons drawn, he didn't run or fight. He just dropped the flashlight and put his hands up, his face blank with shock. "Ma'am, are you Eleanor Patterson?" asked the lead officer, a tall woman whose nameplate read Detective Williams. "Are you injured?" I explained what I'd discovered and how I'd escaped through my bedroom window while Marcus prepared to drug and murder me. Detective Williams listened with professional calm, though I could tell the premeditated nature shocked even her. As officers moved through my house with cameras and evidence bags, I got my first clear look at the full scope of Marcus's murder scheme. He hadn't just poured gasoline around my living room, he'd created an elaborate network of accelerant trails that would have turned my entire house into an inferno within minutes. The basement had additional combustible materials. The electrical panel had been tampered with to create the appearance of accidental fire, and timing devices were placed near multiple ignition sources. "This is one of the most sophisticated arson setups I've seen," the fire marshal told Detective Williams. "Whoever planned this understood fire behavior, building construction, and evidence destruction. This wasn't passion, this was methodical murder disguised as accident." Marcus was read his rights and handcuffed in the same backyard where I'd pushed him on a swing set as a toddler. Even facing arrest, he still seemed unable to understand why I was upset about his plan. "Mom, this would have been better for everyone," he said as officers prepared to put him in the patrol car. "You would have died peacefully, and I could have used the money to build something meaningful. Why couldn't you just cooperate?" The casual way he discussed my murder as a business decision I'd sabotaged made Detective Williams visibly angry. "Sir, you need to stop talking," she told him firmly. But Marcus continued explaining his reasoning, genuinely believing everyone would understand once he laid out the financial benefits. "She's 71 years old," he said, looking directly at me. "Her quality of life is only going to get worse. The insurance money would have let me expand my construction business, create jobs. Her death could have meant something instead of being a waste." Hearing my son describe my life as a waste was more painful than discovering his murder plan. The Marcus I'd raised would never have calculated my life's value against his needs. Over the following days, Detective Williams's investigation revealed the full scoop of Marcus's scheme. He hadn't just been planning to kill me for insurance money, he'd been systematically stealing from me for months while preparing for my murder, creating a complex web of financial fraud. Marcus had been using my name and social security number to open credit cards and bank accounts I knew nothing about, running up debts that would have destroyed my credit and savings. He'd been intercepting mail to prevent me from discovering unauthorized accounts, even filing change of address forms to redirect banking statements to a P.O. Box he controlled. "Your son has been living a double life for at least 10 months, Detective Williams explained, showing me financial records. "He's been using your identity to secure business loans, using your house as collateral for debts you didn't know existed, and draining your retirement accounts through small transfers that wouldn't trigger fraud alerts." The numbers were staggering. Marcus had stolen over $180,000 from my various accounts, money I'd saved over decades of careful budgeting. He'd mortgaged my house twice using forged documents granting him power of attorney, making minimum payments with money stolen from my retirement funds. If his murder plan had succeeded, insurance payouts would have covered all debts while leaving him over $3 million in profit. The most chilling discovery was Marcus's murder timeline, a detailed spreadsheet on his laptop outlining every aspect of his plan with business proposal precision. The document included research on fire investigation procedures, insurance claim processing times, even grief counseling resources he planned to use to establish himself as a devastated son. He had scripts prepared for insurance interviews, Detective Williams said, reading from documents Marcus titled Post-Fire Interview Responses. He practiced answers about your mental state, financial situation, relationships with neighbors. He was planning to portray you as a lonely, confused elderly woman who might have accidentally started a fire through carelessness or cognitive decline. Those prepared responses felt like having my life dissected by someone who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to his financial goals. Marcus had reduced me to stereotypes about elderly women, forgetful, dependent, isolated, that would make my death seem logical to insurance investigators who'd never met me. The investigation also revealed Marcus hadn't been working alone. Phone records showed frequent calls to Derek Mullins, a man with criminal history including insurance fraud and arson for hire. Derek was supposed to provide technical expertise, while Marcus maintained plausible deniability by being seen in public when the fire started. The plan was for Marcus to take you to dinner at a restaurant with security cameras, slip you drugged medication during the meal so you'd fall asleep in the car, then return home to find the house already on fire with you trapped inside, Detective Williams explained. But Marcus's greatest mistake had been trusting Derek Mullins, who'd been cooperating with federal investigators for months. Every conversation about my planned murder had been recorded by the FBI, creating an audio archive of premeditated murder that would make conviction inevitable. The trial lasted 6 weeks, during which I had to testify about discovering Marcus in my living room with gasoline and sleeping pills, explaining to 12 strangers how my own son had calmly discussed drugging me unconscious before burning me alive. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a confused elderly woman who had misunderstood Marcus's intentions. But the recorded phone conversations between Marcus and Derek Mullins destroyed any possibility of claiming innocent intentions. The jury heard hours of audio where my son discussed the best ways to make my murder look accidental, calculated timing to establish an alibi, and expressed frustration about researching fire investigation procedures. The most devastating moment came when Prosecutor Morrison played a recording where Marcus complained about maintaining his loving son act while preparing to murder me. It's exhausting pretending to care about her health problems and loneliness, he'd told Derek. Every time I visit, I have to act concerned about her arthritis and ask about doctor appointments, when all I really care about is whether she's updated her will and how much longer before I can collect insurance. When the guilty verdict was read, Marcus showed no emotion, no regret, no acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without parole possibility for 15 years, along with full restitution for the money he'd stolen and costs of repairing damage to my house and financial accounts. Your actions represent a calculated decision to murder the woman who raised you, the judge said, looking directly at Marcus. You turned trust into a weapon, using knowledge of your mother's routines and vulnerabilities to plan her death with methodical precision. This court finds your actions particularly heinous because they involved systematic abuse of an elderly family member who had every reason to believe you loved and would protect her. As Marcus was led away in shackles, he turned to look at me one final time. I saw something that might have been regret or anger at being caught. I'll never know which, and it doesn't matter. 6 months after Marcus's conviction, I was sitting in my renovated living room, surrounded by new furniture and fresh paint that had replaced everything his gasoline had contaminated. The physical damage was easy to repair, but the emotional scars required therapy sessions and support groups and a complete reassessment of how I understood family and trust. Detective Williams had stayed in touch, updating me about the larger FBI investigation that had grown from Marcus's case. The network of criminals specializing in murdering elderly family members for profit had been dismantled, with Marcus's detailed records helping prosecute similar schemes in 6 other states. I'd also received hundreds of letters from people who'd read about the case, sharing their own stories about family members who'd attempted similar schemes. The letters made me realize how common this type of elder abuse had become and how important it was for people to know they could fight back successfully. The insurance companies had been particularly helpful, not only processing my claims for the property damage, but implementing new procedures to flag suspicious policy changes and prevent the kind of fraud Marcus had attempted. They'd even asked me to speak at training seminars for investigators who specialize in family-related insurance fraud. But perhaps most importantly, I'd discovered that I was stronger and more resourceful than I'd ever imagined. Building a life alone after my husband died had required determination, but protecting it from Marcus's betrayal had required different qualities: the ability to think strategically under pressure, the courage to destroy family relationships when necessary, the strength to choose independence over false security. On quiet evenings, I would sometimes sit in my office and think about the night that had changed everything. Marcus had been wrong about many things, but he'd been most wrong about this. He thought I was a helpless elderly woman who would accept whatever story he told me about my declining health and need for care. He'd calculated that my love for him would override any suspicions I might develop. What he hadn't calculated was that my love for life, for independence, for the right to make my own decisions was stronger than my love for him. He'd seen me as a valuable asset to be liquidated, but I knew I was irreplaceable, not because of monetary value, but because of what I represented about determination, survival, and the refusal to be discarded by people who hadn't earned the right to make that choice. 8 months after Marcus's conviction, I received an envelope with the Georgia Department of Corrections return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Marcus, his first communication since the trial. The letter was 3 pages long, filled with what appeared to be genuine remorse and detailed explanations of his financial desperation that had led to his murder plan. "Mom," the letter began, "I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I need to try to explain what happened to me, how I became someone capable of planning to hurt you. The divorce took everything I'd saved, and the construction business was failing because I'd made terrible decisions with client contracts. I was looking at bankruptcy, losing the house, maybe even jail time for unpaid contractor bonds." He described months of sleepless nights, panic attacks about his mounting debts, and the gradual realization that my insurance policies represented more money than he could earn in a lifetime of construction work. I started researching how house fires happen, how insurance investigations work, and somewhere in that process, I stopped thinking of you as my mother and started seeing you as a solution to my problems. The letter continued with what seemed like genuine horror at his own actions. I convinced myself that you were lonely and suffering, that you'd be better off dead than facing years of declining health alone. But the truth is, I was just desperate and selfish, and I turned you into an obstacle instead of the person who loved me most in the world. Marcus asked for forgiveness, though he acknowledged he didn't deserve it. He also revealed information that made my blood run cold. There are 3 other guys in here who tried similar things with their parents or grandparents. This is apparently more common than I ever realized, and we all told ourselves the same lies about doing our families a favor while planning to profit from their deaths. I read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. I never responded, and I never would. But keeping it reminded me that the son I'd raised was still somewhere inside the man who'd tried to kill me, buried under desperation and greed, but not completely gone. 2 years after that terrible February night, I was standing in the kitchen of my fully renovated home, preparing breakfast for my neighbor's granddaughter who stayed with me every morning before school while her parents worked early shifts. 7-year-old Emma had become like the grandchild I'd never had, filling my house with laughter and reminding me that not all family relationships were poisoned by greed and betrayal. Detective Williams had called the night before to tell me that the FBI investigation Marcus's case had triggered had resulted in the prosecution of an entire network of criminals who specialized in elder abuse and insurance fraud. "Your case broke this wide open," she said. "We've prevented at least 12 other planned murders and recovered millions in stolen assets. Your decision to fight back instead of becoming a victim saved a lot of lives." The insurance industry had also implemented new safeguards based on what they'd learned from Marcus's scheme. Sudden increases in coverage amounts now triggered automatic investigations, especially when the beneficiaries had access to the policyholder's finances or living situation. Several insurance companies had asked me to consult on their fraud prevention programs, work that had given me a new sense of purpose in my retirement years. But perhaps most importantly, I discovered that surviving Marcus's betrayal had made me stronger and more independent than I'd ever imagined possible. The woman who'd been terrified of living alone after her husband died had become someone who could outwit a calculated murderer and rebuild her life from the ashes of family destruction. As I watched Emma carefully crack eggs into a bowl, concentrating with the intense focus that 7-year-olds bring to important tasks, I thought about the future Marcus had tried to steal from me. Every morning I woke up, every conversation with friends, every small act of kindness I could offer to others was a victory over his plan to reduce my life to nothing more than an insurance payout. Marcus would be eligible for parole in 13 more years when he was 58 years old and I was 84. I might not live to see that day, but if I did, I would be ready for him. Not with anger or thoughts of revenge, but with the quiet strength of someone who had faced the worst kind of betrayal and chosen to keep living, loving, and building something meaningful from the wreckage. The house he'd tried to burn down had become a sanctuary again, filled with the sounds of children playing and friends laughing and all the small joys that make life worth protecting. And every night when I locked my doors and set my alarm system, I remembered that I was no longer the trusting, vulnerable woman Marcus had seen as an easy target. I was Eleanor Patterson, survivor, fighter, and living proof that some people are too stubborn to be murdered for insurance money.